My name is Dana Cisco and I'm 33 years old. The text came in at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening, right as I was pulling a tray of roasted vegetables out of the oven. My phone buzzed against the counter, and I saw my sister's name light up the screen. Priya. No, wait, I need a different name for her too since the instructions say no Priya. I'll call her Whitney. Whitney's text read, "Wire me $7,200 for my daughter's sweet 16. Under the message were 3 photos. The first was a banquet hall dripping in gold chiffon drapery, crystal chandeliers reflecting off a dance floor that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. The second was a dress, a sequined, floor-length gown in blush pink, still on the hanger, tags visible. The third was a cake. 5 tiers, edible gold leaf, a small fondant tiara perched on top. The caption under that last photo simply said, $700, worth every penny, right?" I stared at my phone for a long moment before setting it face down on the counter. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something closer to disbelief mixed with a slow-burning anger I hadn't felt in years. Whitney and I had never been close, not really. We were sisters by blood, but we'd grown up in 2 completely different households under the same roof. She was the golden child, the one who got the car for her 16th birthday while I got a part-time job at the local diner to save for my own. She was the one my parents bragged about at holiday dinners, even when her choices left the rest of us cleaning up the mess. And now, 15 years later, she wanted me to hand over more than a third of my monthly salary for a party. I picked the phone back up and typed my response before I could second-guess myself. Get a job. 3 words. No explanation, no softening, no emoji to cushion the blow. I hit send and immediately felt a strange mixture of relief and dread, like I'd just stepped off a ledge I couldn't climb back onto. The reply didn't come from Whitney. It came from my father 10 minutes later. His name is Grant, and Grant has never once in my life texted me anything longer than a single sentence. This one read, "Pay up or you're no longer family." I read it 3 times, waiting for it to make sense, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something less brutal. They didn't. My father, a man who once told me that money and family should never mix, who lectured me for years about staying humble and not raising entitled children, was now threatening to erase me from his life over a 16th birthday party I wasn't invited to plan, wasn't asked to help with, and apparently was only being informed about so I could foot the bill. I sat down at my kitchen table, the roasted vegetables going cold beside me, and I thought about every single time I had shown up for this family without asking for anything in return. I thought about the $4,000 I'd quietly wired my parents 3 years ago when their roof caved in during a storm. No fanfare, no thank you card. Just help because that's what you do for people you love. I thought about the countless times I'd driven 6 hours to babysit Whitney's kids so she and her husband could take weekend trips, never once complaining, never once asking for gas money. I thought about how none of that mattered now. How one refusal to fund a $7,200 party had somehow erased 15 years of quiet, unspoken loyalty. By the time the sun went down, I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry in the loud, explosive way I thought I'd be. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me, like fog lifting off a lake at dawn. I understood, finally and completely, that this family had never valued me for who I was. They valued me for what I could provide, quietly and without question, and the moment I stopped providing, I stopped mattering. That night, around 9 o'clock, I picked up my phone one more time. Not to text Whitney, not to call my father. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for, someone I hadn't spoken to in months but who I knew would answer no matter the hour. I pressed call, and when the line connected, I said only 4 words. Cancel. Cancel it all. There was a pause on the other end, then a slow exhale, and then a single question that made my stomach drop and my resolve harden all at once. By 7:30 the next morning, my phone would not stop ringing, and none of the calls would be from people offering apologies. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Marisol, my best friend since college, who also happened to be the event coordinator at Everly Grand, the venue in the photos Whitney had sent me. I hadn't put it together until I saw the chandeliers in that picture, but the moment I recognized the ballroom, everything clicked into place. 6 months ago, Whitney had asked me to help her get a family discount at the venue where Marisol worked, and because I loved my niece and wanted to be supportive, I'd made an introduction and even co-signed the deposit as a favor, trusting that Whitney and her husband would handle the rest of the payments themselves. What I hadn't realized until that night was that Whitney had quietly listed me as the primary contact and financial guarantor on the entire event, the caterer, the dress boutique, and the bakery included. When Marisol answered the phone, her first words were, "Dana, is everything okay?" I saw the remaining balances due Friday. I told her everything, the text, the demand, my father's ultimatum, and then I asked her to cancel every single booking tied to my name. She went quiet for a moment, then asked me if I was absolutely sure, because once she pulled the plug, there would be no getting the deposits back and no rebooking the date. I told her I had never been more sure of anything in my life. By 7:30 the next morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls, none of them apologies. The first was from the dress boutique, informing me that the gown reserved under my name had been released back into inventory per my cancellation request. The second was from the bakery, confirming that the 5-tier cake order had been voided and the deposit forfeited. The third, fourth, and fifth calls were all from Whitney, her voicemails escalating from confusion to fury to something that sounded, for the first time in years, like genuine panic. "Dana, what did you do? The venue says everything's canceled. Call me back right now." I didn't call her back. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee, sat on my porch, and watched the sun climb over the trees, feeling lighter than I had and longer than I could remember. My father called next, and this time I answered. His voice was sharp, demanding to know why I would humiliate the family by pulling my support at the last minute. I told him calmly that I hadn't pulled support. I had simply stopped being used as a blank check for a party I was never even invited to attend. I reminded him that 15 years of showing up, of paying quietly, of never asking for anything in return, had earned me nothing but an ultimatum the one time I said no. I told him that if loving me conditionally, based on what I could provide, was his version of family, then maybe I didn't want to be counted in that family after all. There was a long silence on the line, and for the first time in my life, my father didn't have a quick response. Word spread fast after that. My aunt called, my cousins texted, even my mother reached out, though her message was less about reconciliation and more about damage control, asking if there was any way to fix things before people start talking. I realized then that the family's concern was never truly about me, and it certainly wasn't about my niece's birthday. It was about appearances, about maintaining a certain image at any cost, even if that cost was my dignity and my bank account. Whitney eventually called 2 days later, her tone softer, almost pleading, admitting that she had made a mistake by assuming I would simply cover everything without being asked properly. She said the party could still happen, just smaller, and asked if I would reconsider helping with even a portion of the cost. I told her I loved my niece and would happily send her a birthday gift directly, something meaningful and personal, but I would not be funding a $7,200 fantasy built on assumptions and threats. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in me permanently. I stopped answering guilt-laced messages within minutes. I stopped feeling responsible for problems I didn't create. I started saying no more often, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, and I discovered that the people who truly valued me stuck around, while the ones who only valued my wallet slowly faded into the background. My niece, it turned out, ended up having a small backyard party with balloons and a store-bought cake, and according to my mother, she smiled more that day than she had during any of the extravagant planning sessions. Sometimes the smallest celebrations hold the most genuine love, and sometimes the people who scream the loudest about family are the ones who understand it the least.